You built Real Professional Network as a deliberate networking system. Explain deliberate networking in operator terms. What is the mechanism and how does it actually create opportunities?
Great question. When you think of traditional networking, and I love traditional networking, it might be at a large cocktail function with a lot of people in the room, and you might have just listened to some really good speakers, and you're meeting each other and you're exchanging business cards with each other. And really, that's what you think you're doing, but really probably what you're doing is you're hanging out with some buddies.
Yeah, right.
And you might pick up a really good new prospect by one of your buddy's friend walking up, and you getting to meet that friend. And because you're friends with your buddy, his friend deems that you're credible. Well, deliberate networking is the same thing, except much more deliberate. And it starts with a group of friends, business friends of like mind, and in our case, commercial real estate people. And then we bring our friends to the table. And then each person takes a moment to share really not what they do, because other commercial real estate people know what they do. I can say I represent owner and owner-user deals, and they know what an owner-user deal is, and they know that I'm a broker, so I don't need to explain that part to them. But to tell them that I've been real successful doing reverse 1031, that might be a little bit more than they understand. And they might understand a 1031 exchange and not tell somebody that. They might also understand what a reverse 1031 exchange is conceptually, but what they probably never realized is that an owner of a building and of a business who's got 50 employees there, the last thing he wants to do is go tell his employees that he's thinking about moving. Where would they like to move? That's the very last thing the guy wants to talk about. What he'd rather do is find the right alternative for his business and then develop a plan to communicate that to his employees. And many of the other guys that were industrial brokers or office brokers or net lease brokers or restaurant brokers or cost segregation professionals or commercial real estate lawyers or accountants or architects or engineers, the rest of it, they didn't know that much detail. But it would not be out of the realm of possibility that sometime during the next 12 months that they had lunch with somebody who was moving their business and owned it, and then that particular person, to try to continue the conversation, could say, well, have you ever heard of a reverse 1031 exchange? And the guy might, he might say, well, I know what a 1031 exchange is. He might kind of, an entrepreneur might say, oh yeah, I understand, and not understand. But then, the guy says, well, I've got a buddy that does a lot of these things. And what I took away from what he told me is that it gives you, the business owner, the ability to not have to tell your employees that you're moving, or put a sign up in your yard, or have somebody show your building during the daytime, or that kind of thing. And if I gave my buddy, the net lease broker, that much ammunition, he'd remember that, and he could get that much out at the lunch table and say, well, let me introduce, Rick Lackey? Yeah, well, I know Rick Lackey. He's an office broker. Well, he is, but he's really now representing owners, doing owner-user deals. Maybe we ought to get together and have lunch. And that net lease guy would know that if he brought me to the table, that we would split our fee. And so all of a sudden, this lunch meeting for his business would continue, and he could continue to pursue that person, but he could also bring that person important value to them right now, and bring me value right now, and then, hopefully, get a piece of the fee. In my case, it's always half. So that, they would get half of the fee. So that was good. That was good for them. And of course, when he brings me a piece of business, if I'm wired right, and I believe I'm wired right, I'm going to not only do a good job for his client, but I'm going to try to take him a piece of business, because, in the relationship business, quid pro quo is alive and well. And it's, if a guy brings you a piece of business, you need to return the favor. So that's deliberate networking. And what we do at Real Professionals is we might have 10 or 15 people of different disciplines sitting in a law firm conference room, and each person shares something that they recently worked on with somebody, and it gives everybody else in the room an arrow that they can put in their quiver, so that next week when they're having lunch, they might need to pull that arrow out. And then we also bring our friends that are complementary to the group, and it just, multiplies from there. So that's deliberate networking, from a conversation standpoint.
Is it online, or can it be remote, or does it have to be in person?
Well, during COVID, it was online because that was the only choice we had. But as a general rule, it's live and in person. We currently operate 10 mastermind groups around the country and are growing like any entrepreneurial business does.